Yeah, create the slides, and then where do we see people? Okay, thank you.
I see the best comment that already motivates me to our best from Mariana. I've been waiting a whole month for this presentation. I believe we should talk sometime soon. Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you guys for joining us today. For us, it's a huge surprise because we hit all-time record milestone when it comes to sign-ups. 1,500 people signed up for this event, and we never run ads or whatever, invite cold audience. So thank you all for your trust and for joining us. And today we want to talk with you and share with you our process for developing full funnel go-to-market strategy, which is at the same time account-based and demand generation, right? So we'll share with you our framework. We just want to focus on this topic and give you step-by-step instruction. That being said, one question to you guys, please post all your questions in the Q&A section. If you look at the right sidebar, there is a section called Q&A. So you can leave all your questions there. A lot of people joined that webinar, so just not to lose your questions in the chat, please make sure that you post all these questions in that Q&A section. And before we'll start, traditional question, where you guys joining us from? We are both broadcasting from sunny Spain. We are almost neighbors with Vladimir now. Where you guys joining us from? Curious to see. Estonia, Lithuania, Manchester, France, Ireland, Morocco, London, Belgrade, New Jersey, Chicago, London, Birmingham, Krakow. Finally, I see some people from my home city, South Africa, Rostock, India. Cool. Great to see our international audience again chatting with us. So that being said, I think we can kick it off. I know maybe I need to cover the most common question that you guys ask about the recording and the slides. So the recording would be available here on the platform. If you log in after a few hours when we finish the presentation, you can watch the recording. That's the first thing. The slides, we can't upload slides here. We can't share it from the platform. So if you want to get the slides, just DM me on LinkedIn, and I will send you the deck. So that being said, let's kick it off. I'm super excited. So the first thing that I would love to share to give you a further context as an intro to our framework, right, is the state of full funnel B2B marketing. So earlier this year, our team ran market research. We have interviewed 158. You know that we always love to share precise numbers, no fake numbers. So we have interviewed 158 B2B companies with high ACV, with long sales cycles, and you can see the breakdown by headcount and by roles. So we wanted deliberately to talk to different types of companies, I mean, in terms of team size and in terms of job roles, to understand better what are the challenges and what are the best practices these companies have to solve these challenges. And this webinar obviously not about this research because we have already hosted and presented the results from that research. But I believe what makes sense to share with you is the top challenges. Almost 65% of participants considered increasing marketing source pipeline and revenue as a top priority. And if you look at the breakdown, right, so we defined two categories. These insights were coming from the live interviews. We had one-on-one calls with these people. So we were just extracting their answers, right, how they called their challenges, and then we put them in the relevant category. When it comes to generating pipeline and revenue, it was all about building a consistent and predictable revenue pipeline, increasing the number of qualified leads, driving revenue growth through effective marketing strategies, generating high-quality leads that convert into sales, allocated our limited budget and resources effectively to maximize ROI. You see how these goals are connected to each other, right? So basically, if you look at these replies, it means we need to do more with less and drive growth. Now, the most interesting fact. When we asked, how are you guys going to solve these challenges? In most cases, their replies reminded me about famous dialogue from the Alice from Wonderland, where, if you remember that dialogue, she was talking to the Cheshire Cat and she asked, hey, Cat, can you please tell me which way I should go from here? And Cat replied, that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. And Alice said, I don't much care where to. And then Cat said, then it doesn't matter which way you should go, right? But then Alice added, well, so long when I get somewhere, right? And then Cat said, yeah, for sure. You need to do that, but only if you walk long enough, right? And this is basically how most companies, unfortunately, solve their challenges, right? They don't have a clear path, clear framework how to handle these challenges, right? They think that, okay, let's do something, let's go somewhere, and let's walk long enough. And this is basically the advice that we hear all the day long on LinkedIn, right? It's a long-term game. Let's do something and let's see. Okay, we don't like that approach. We always like to define the path where we want to go. And we have a good framework that we have tested for in the past 3 years with 50 plus B2B companies that were or are currently our clients. And we want to share this framework with you one by one. So how to develop full funnel go-to-market strategy.
Hello, everybody from Valencia here. And today I want to share the framework that we use. And when I say framework, as you know, we like to keep things practical. So what we don't want you to end up with is slideware or a 50-page document nobody will read or implement. We want you to end up with a very actionable strategy you can implement, that you're actually going to drive awareness and demand for your product and turn that into sales qualified opportunities. So with that out of the way, let's jump in. The first thing that I wanted to share is what are the key questions that we want to answer with our go-to-market strategy. And the first one is, how can we grow our revenue? At the end, this is what we want. This is our end goal. So we need to understand things like what worked in the past, where did we make the most revenue from existing accounts, from net new accounts, from which segments, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to dive much more into that. But also, what are the things that worked, but also what are the things that we might have missed and that we need to implement to drive revenue, right? The essential question, and I think you will see that this essential question is like, who are our best customers and how can we replicate those best customers? A lot of what we are going to be talking about today, a lot of what we do within our go-to-market strategy development revolves around that question. Now, we want to understand who these customers are and how to replicate those best deals. But in order to be able to do that, we really need to understand how they discover, evaluate, and buy a product like ours. And on the mirror side of it, we want to figure out how we can actually trigger and influence their buyer journey, their buying process. And of course, we want this buying process not to only result in them considering us, but also choosing us. So we really want to understand why our best customers choose us, what are our meaningful ways of differentiating, and how can we communicate in the market in a way that not only resonates, which is like super important because otherwise you just get ignored, but also actually differentiates us. What you want to be communicated is how you're different and worth buying, right? And then really a key question is, how do I stop throwing spaghetti at the walls and seeing what sticks? And how do I make sure they understand what are the right programs to run to drive revenue and the goals that I want to achieve with my go-to-market strategy. Now, all of that would remain very theoretical if we didn't also figure out what are the exact resources, skills, tools, technology, and budget that we need to run this. And obviously, we all work with limitations. So, what can we do with what we have, and what is kind of the minimal thing that we need to add in terms of skills, in terms of potentially, budget or other things that we might be missing in order to be able to do this and actually run the strategy. And I think something that is just from experience working with so many companies and teams, something that we see in, I would say, 90% of companies is kind of misalignment. So how do we make sure that everybody actually is aligned and understands the go-to-market strategy, the elements, and that we are all focused on the same target market, on the same programs, and on the same goals? So these are the questions, and I'll just very briefly share the overview of the framework, and then we are going to dive into step by step. So this is the overview. Very briefly, we start by analyzing the revenue, historical growth and revenue. Where is it coming from? We then start to understand, when we break this revenue down into market segments, regions and verticals, et cetera, where should we actually focus on? Where should our priority go? Then zooming in further, understanding who are the best customers there, and starting to run customer research, interviewing those customers to understand their buying process and understand their way that they're making decisions, etc. And then based on this input, we can develop the ideal customer profile that we are going to use to obviously define the targeting, target account list, etc., but also to develop the messaging. So we are resonating and differentiating. We are developing not just the buyer journey, understanding how people are buying, how our target buyers are buying, but also how we are going to actually, what kind of channels, programs, and content we need to influence that buyer journey, so we actually market in a way that our customers are buying, and not in a naive linear way, as unfortunately a lot of companies still are doing today. And then, of course, you want to also understand, how am I going to measure the success? What are the key metrics that I want to report on, and to actually see whether our programs are working? And finally, having all of that put in a plan that is aligned with our team, with our budget, and that we have clarity on what the different team members need to do. What are the marketing playbooks? What are the sales playbooks? How are we going to work together on those same goals? So, Andre, you want to take it over?
Yeah, let's discuss each of the steps one by one. As I mentioned, we want to make this framework logical for you, so you understand where to start. You don't need to be Alice in that famous book, right? And as Vladimir mentioned, I believe that the first step should be always setting up goals and objectives by analyzing revenue and sales pipeline velocity. That's the key thing. I know a lot of companies don't track sales pipeline velocity, and that's a huge, I don't want to call it mistake, but okay, this is a huge missing metric that gives you a good understanding of your revenue trajectory. Sales pipeline velocity obviously is measured for the new logos, but it gives you an idea of how healthy your pipeline is, because it's based on the number of sales qualified opportunities you generate, your win rate, your sales cycle length, and your average contract value. If you do the analysis for this year, right, you can clearly see the spikes or decreases in your sales pipeline velocity. And a lot of companies, as you have already seen in our report, in our research, right, these companies say, okay, we need to generate more leads. But the real question should we ask ourselves if we'll generate more sales qualified opportunities, but we have a leaky funnel, so we have a low win rate, we have a long sales cycle, we have a low ACV. Will it help us to generate more revenue, right? Pouring more water into a leaky bucket never helps. So quite often we can improve revenue trajectory simply by improving revenue metrics as win rate, as sales cycle length, as ACV. And by the way, this is the first step to introduce account-based marketing, when you start analyzing the revenue that is coming from different tiers of accounts, right? So that's the first thing. You can look, okay, so our win rate is decreasing, right, this year. So why does it happen? This way you trigger the right question and you trigger the right thinking. How can we improve our win rate, and what are the reasons why this win rate decreases, right? Maybe we are targeting wrong segments, or maybe our segments or markets are saturated, or maybe our marketing message doesn't resonate, whatever. There might be multiple reasons, but you start with the right thinking how to solve this issue. Next, it always makes sense to break down your revenue into net new revenue, into renewed revenue, and into expansion revenue. Because quite often you can, and one of the lowest hanging fruits to grow your revenue is expanding businesses with existing clients. If you already have a few enterprise clients, right, you can always evaluate the potential of each of the client and then say, okay, so for this client, we basically use 20% of revenue, and there is a way to go. So that should be your next logical step. From the business perspective, it doesn't really matter if existing customers generate more revenue for us, or if new customers will come and generate that revenue. But unfortunately, too many companies simply focus themselves on acquisition, new leads, new customers, new logos, etc. Right? If you do that planning, if you do that breakdown, and if you do this analysis, you'll be able to see, are we really expanding our revenue and also renewed revenue? Because here is the challenge. I know lots of companies never track this metric, but let me ask you a question, guys. What if your best customers will churn tomorrow, right? You need to somehow, and that would be a decent chunk of your revenue. And to hit your revenue quota, now you need to recompensate that revenue, right? So basically revenue quota increases. A lot of companies never think about this, but you must always thinking about renewed revenue. And in your case, you should include it into your go-to-market strategy planning. So do this analysis. It will trigger the right questions and the right way of thinking how and how should we set up the goals for our go-to-market strategy, and what should be our objectives. And the next step is understanding historical growth by markets and verticals. We'll have to look at several parameters, right? We'll have to extract the data, and I recommend to extract the data for at least last 3 years, and then you need to go through the revenue generated. You can look at different criteria like paying customers, ACV, number of positive or let's say successful implementations, successful case studies, year-to-year growth, ACV, win rate, etc. So you can evaluate these different segments from different perspectives. Even if you look at this simple chart, you'll already see that not segments were created equal. And that's the answer to the question how to do more with less, right? First answer is focusing on the right markets, on the right market segments. And that's why this historical growth enables us to do that decision. When we finish this, the next, and only when we finish this, we can actually start working on the go-to-market strategy elements that we're going to share next.
All right. So we spoke about defining our best customers and how one of the key goals is to figure out how to replicate our best customers. But when we talk about best customers, let's make it concrete. So the way that you can think about it is following the 80-20 principle, right? Majority of B2B companies have somewhere in the vicinity of, let's say, 20% of their target accounts or existing customers generate about 80% of the revenue. It may be a little bit different. It may be a little bit more. It may be a bit less. But generally, it will be something like that. So the first thing you want to do is when you're developing your go-to-market strategy, you want to take the customers, the top customers from that target vertical that you have selected, right? And you want to look at the top 20 customers that are generating 80% of the revenue. Now, we already see here some tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, without going into a lot of details. Let's say where we want to focus on is the top ones, the tier 1 and tier 2. And then if you really want to identify the best customers or the one with the highest revenue potential, what you can do is apply the 80-20 principle again, right? So instead of looking, so you apply the 80-20 principle on top 20 customers, you end up with, let's say, 4% of customers generating about 64% of your revenue, right? Just theoretically, right? And so the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out, and you have that list. This is your basic tool throughout the go-to-market development. It is those customers that you're going to study. It is those customers that you're going to use to develop the ideal customer profile. And it is those customers that you need to interview and basically create your, because again, remember, our goal is to replicate our best customers. So that's where we really focus on. Now, having identified those customers, what we want to do is we want to start customer research. Part of that research can be done by speaking to sales, looking at the CRM, call logs, if you have recordings, if you have Gong potentially or another tool like that, studying those, speaking to sales, studying the best deals. But at the end, here is the fact. Your buyers spend, I think, only 17% or something like that of their time talking to vendors, which means that they spend like more than 80% of their time not talking to vendors, doing stuff that is not probably tracked in your system. You don't know what they're doing unless you speak to them. And by the way, you're not the only vendor they are speaking to. So probably out of their whole buying process, they have spent 10% on speaking with your sales, right? And we all know that the information and the memory of our salespeople is not perfect. All the reasons that I wanted to mention for you to go and actually book those calls and have customer interviews. What are the kind of questions that you want to ask them? You want to ask them about their buying triggers. So what was going on in their business that made them consider this product? You want to understand where and how they start discovering a product like yours, and what are the steps that they take, and really important, what are the criteria that they use to evaluate a product like yours? What are the criteria that they used when they were evaluating what were the factors that impacted their decision? Who was involved? And probably one of the most important questions is, why did they choose you over the competitors? And one more thing that is extremely important when you're selling to upper mid-market, or if you want to move up market and you're selling to upper mid-market enterprise customers, that according to a recent study from Gartner, enterprise customers having something like 14, 15 buyers in the buying center on average, you really want to figure out who else was involved in that decision-making process, who was involved, who was asked for an advice, who was participating in meetings, etc., etc. So this is the reason why you want to do this, and the questions that you should be asking in those interviews. And having collected all this data from sales calls, sales conversations, customer interviews, you want to bring it all together and create an ideal customer profile that consists of essentially 5 pillars. So let me just quickly go over these 5 pillars. The first pillars are the firmographics and the technographics, right? Remember, we want to be able to go after our top customers, and firmographics and technographics are the basis of that. But they are not enough, because when you're selling to enterprise or upper mid-market, you cannot afford to spend something like 9, 12, sometimes 18 months chasing a deal that only has a 10% or less chance of closing. So you not only want to be going after the firmographics fit, but actually to figure out what are the characteristics and criteria, what probably you can't read on this slide, custom criteria we call them, or qualification criteria, but specific criteria that make an account a good fit for you, where they're likely to have the need, and that you have a reasonable chance of winning and closing. Okay. And then on the flip side, also checking out those lost deals, right? If you look at your largest lost deals from that market segment and dive in, can we identify some other criteria, red flags, warning signs that may indicate that if we see that again in the future, we should either disqualify or at least deprioritize those accounts? These are the so-called disqualification criteria. Next to that, obviously, I already mentioned, we want to map out the buying center or the buying committee, so the different roles. We're usually looking at least 4 roles, which are the champions, the people who champion our deal, and usually the people who we have the most contact with. Obviously, the decision makers, the people who sign the contract, but also understanding who are all the influencers. So people who have been asked for an advice, participated in meetings, been on email threads, etc. Because very often, you just are going to increase the chance of closing a deal. The more people in the buying committee you influence, you can only influence them if you understand them, right? And then finally, a special type of influencer called blocker are the type of people that are against your solution or are competing for the same budget usually, right? So with all of that, you're going to summarize and have your ideal customer profile. We also see here different tiers, etc. Without going into a lot of details, we also want to understand within that one segment, within the ICP, etc. Like, you remember the 80-20 principle. So what are the criteria for us to be able to say, hey, these are really the top tier 1 revenue with the highest revenue potential, the 4% that generates 64% of our revenue, theoretically, right? And these are the tier 2 accounts, and these are the others. So these are the elements that you want to capture in your ICP. So Andrei, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, the next step is developing and validating your marketing message, because now we defined our target audience, right? How can we communicate to them the value of our product? How can we explain the value of our product? And how can we make sure that we stand out from the competition? We differentiate ourselves. And here is an interesting fact. So if you guys have attended our full funnel summit, let me know, by the way, in the chat if you have attended our last full funnel summit. Type plus in the chat. Curious to see. We had a session with Pep Laya. It was live marketing message tear down. A few people submitted their websites, and we were reviewing their marketing message. And they were like, what I want to say, that we didn't want to criticize anybody, right? It was just providing meaningful feedback. The problem with marketing message that a lot of companies, they skip all the previous steps. They try to go with the broad targeting. They combine the data about all markets, all segments, all clients, and try to create one size fits all universal message, which doesn't resonate with anybody. And then the problem is, quite often, this is the problem why companies have problems with the conversion, why sales spend a lot of time to explain the product value and persuade target accounts. And unfortunately, a lot of companies don't have a good process when it comes to marketing message development. Usually it's kind of creative work. They hire a copywriter, or in some small organizations, we know there is like a strategic session where everybody has an opinion how the message should sound, and everybody wants to sound smart, sound savvy. But the key point, what we need to do, is to make sure that our marketing message actually explains what our product does, who are the right fit users for this product and how it's different from the competition, right? These are the key insights. And where we are getting these insights from, obviously from the customer research and from the market research, where we interview our potential target accounts, right? So we need to combine this insight. And then you can do, again, two things. You can use market and message testing software like Winter, for example, which PEP runs, or you can do the market research on your own. You can ask sales team to validate market and message on sales calls. There are multiple ways how to do it, but make sure that you actually get feedback from real people, right? Is it clear enough? Do they understand what your product does, how it's different from the competition, etc. Right? These are the fundamentals. Without it, unfortunately, a lot of marketing programs are doomed. And when you finish this one, you need to navigate to the next basically item or step in our go-to-market strategy, which is defining typical buyer journey scenarios.
All right. So when it comes to mapping out the buyer journey, there are several things that you want to understand. And the first thing you want to understand, I spoke about it briefly, are the buying triggers. So what is happening in the business before you actually before they knock on your door, before they speak to you, before they reach out to you, like what are because like if you think, what are the things that are happening that are making them shift their priorities to the kind of challenges or the challenges you can help them solve or the opportunities you can help them create, right? And so the buyers don't buy because they see an ad. The buyers usually buy because there is some sort of an internal trigger. Let's say the CFO has reviewed their numbers and saw that they have suffered, let's say, a lot of loss due to the currency fluctuation. Now, this could be a trigger for them to consider a solution to manage this risk, right? And so for each of these triggers, what you want to understand is, okay, what are now the steps that they go through? What are the different stages that they go through as they try to understand their problem, as they start to discover those different solutions, as they basically start to evaluate, vet those solutions, how do they make a selection, and how do they finally make the decision? Now, as you're mapping those stages, there are a couple of things that you want to know. You want to know for each stage, who are the people who are involved, what are the kind of questions and objections that they have in that stage. And by knowing that, you can now start to think about, okay, what are the activities and content that I need to create to actually address those questions of the buyers as they move through the buying stage. And remember, one of the key goals of our go-to-market strategy was the questions was, how do we trigger and influence the buyer journey? So that is why this step is so essential. Now, if you understand the buyer journey, you can start mapping out, like I said, the priority activities, programs, channels, and content that you're going to use to actually influence that. So without here diving into details, this is just one example where you're kind of summarizing the different content, activities, and channels that you're going to use. And really important here is you can already start mapping the resources. So the people who are going to be responsible for the specific activity here, right? Now you're actually going to start, this is going to be like the input that you're going to use to create your go-to-market plan. And with this one, I think it's also important to address this question. We mentioned it several times. How do we actually measure it? So, Andre, maybe you can share that.
We have already discussed with you guys basically the revenue breakdown by analyzing sales pipeline velocity and revenue. And I believe these are the two core metrics that you need to track. You need to measure marketing efficiency by revenue. I totally understand that a lot of companies want to make marketing predictable and they want to see a clear attribution of every program, but the problem is that the buying process is not linear, right? And that's why we discussed that buying process. When you involve your GTM team in the buyer journey mapping, and when you start thinking, okay, how can we influence these different steps? How can we trigger that buyer journey, right? Then you'll see that most of the activities, they are not connected directly to revenue. For example, we posted something on LinkedIn today. We don't expect that that post will immediately, create inbound. But we never measure our LinkedIn posts by inbound opportunities that are coming in. It's a nurturing step, or if you will, it's demand generation step, right? And these programs shouldn't be measured that way. And that's why ultimately we don't like to measure by revenue every single program. We want to measure marketing contribution to revenue, right? Quite often it makes sense to look at number of sales qualified opportunities, and if you want to justify marketing contribution to revenue, you can mention how many sales qualified opportunities came from marketing, right? Or marketing source pipeline or revenue or whatever, if you want. From the business perspective, I believe in all bound revenue. It doesn't really matter who generated revenue, right? That's why both marketing and sales exist, right? These are the functions that drive revenue. But from the business perspective, unfortunately, too many companies have siloed teams, and then to justify marketing, you can measure these things, right? But you present, okay, this was the marketing source revenue, this was impact on the revenue metrics, and ultimately this is how marketing should be evaluated. And quite often I hear the second question, but okay, how then I can prove, the efficiency of my demand generation programs, of my awareness programs that are not directly contributing to revenue. For these specific programs, we always love to create individual reports with leading indicators. Leading indicators are the actions that are under our control. Revenue opportunities, these are lagging indicators. Whatever everybody will tell you, these are lagging indicators. These are the consequences of your activities. You can't make, I don't know who will tell you that you can make a forecast on how many opportunities you will generate. You can use some data analysis, but in the reality is always different, right? But what you can ensure is that you execute the actions that can lead to these opportunities and to revenue. And so for every report, for every program that we create a report on these leading indicators. We make sure that there is buy-in from sales and from executives, and then we start executing it. And we always try to connect the dots between the program and the revenue, so they can always clearly see how this program impacted the pipeline. So these are two essentials: developing a unified revenue report and developing individual reports for every marketing program with the leading indicators.
All right, so let's talk about marketing planning. A lot of times people ask us, with such a small team, how are you able to put out that much content and do all these activities there? And the simple answer is actually focusing 80% of our resources and time and effort into things that are working, right? So what we call here the regular operations, right? So we want to make sure that we have daily, for example, this is just an example of our operations, right? Daily social posts on 3 profiles on LinkedIn. Maybe we are not running a lot of paid distribution, but maybe this is part of your daily ongoing activities. Then you might have some weekly activities, newsletter, live podcast. This is the case for us, but also running internal pipeline review meetings. You might have monthly webinars. You will run reporting. Somebody asked how often you should do reporting, at least like once a month. And then quarterly, you might run bigger events or other activities. But the essence here is focus 80% of your effort and budget on the proven operations, and make sure that you're actually running, operationalizing that, and that there is no way that, for example, we are going to miss, if you are committed to a specific demand generation calendar or specific marketing operations, we put a very high priority on making sure that they happen, right? So that's the 80%. Now, the 20% of the marketing budget, you can allocate more on experiments, piloting new programs, right? And the whole idea there is that if you have done your analysis and audited the way that you're marketing right now, looking at what's working, what's actually generating revenue, what is not, all the way down to the CRM system, right? You can start to understand that, well, maybe some of the activities are not very effective and maybe I can remove them, but maybe you have also noticed that you're missing some key elements. Now, we always suggest to, when introducing a new program, let's say you want to do ABM because really it's something that based on your analysis is missed today and you believe you're losing opportunities because you're not doing that, don't jump on this and make it like 70% of your efforts, or put all those eggs in your basket. It will take time for you to figure out and develop that program. There is a lot of learning. There is some fine tuning. So that's why we always suggest to start with a pilot. And if during the pilot you see that you're getting traction, then you can focus on operationalization. And once operationalized, it moves to the other bucket. So hopefully this gives you an idea about how you can think about planning for the next year. And then really important is when you are presenting your plan, when you are creating it and you're presenting and trying to get the buy-in, is to really understand, not just say, okay, we want to do ABM or we want to do demand generation. How are you going to do it? Well, we are going to ungate content and run some paid ads, etc. What you need to do basically is, one, you need to connect the dots and show exactly on the buy journey, if you remember that big graph, how all these different activities impact the buying journey, connect the dots, and how do they lead to the revenue. All right, that's the one point. But the other point also, you need to have a solid plan. The majority of marketing plans fail because there is a lack of clarity in who needs to do what when, right? So this is really important that you spend sufficient time in making sure that this clarity is there about how you're going to actually implement it.
And a few more things that you need to achieve when you are finishing your go-to-market strategy preparation. You need to achieve 2 levels of alignment. The first one is go-to-market fundamentals alignment on the things that we just mentioned, right? All things that were just previously mentioned, like focus segments, like ideal customer profile, like the programs that we are going to run together to influence the buyer journey, our value proposition and marketing message reporting. And there are a few more things that I would love to mention, as you can see here, definitions and statuses. This is really ridiculous. If you'll open LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of discussions about MQLs, SQLs, SQOs, MQAs, and a lot of different marketing slang definitions. But now here is the funny fact. We always do this test with new customers. And when we ask, can you please guys tell us the definition of all this, abbreviations, MQL, SQL, whatever, different people tell us different definitions. And that's the first thing, right? What are you going to call a lead? So that's the first thing. What are the statuses you are using in your pipeline and why? There is no point to showcase that you have generated 16,000 MQLs last year if you are just generated only 67 customers from that volume. So a lot of these things you need to nail down. Next is the sources and ownership of intent and engagement data. Marketers are running webinar. For example, we are running this webinar with Vlad, but imagine we have sales team, right? Who is going to share the data from this webinar with the sale, or who is basically going to qualify this data and see, okay, and match it with the accounts in our pipeline, creating new logos, maybe defining new target accounts that we can target. And that leads us to the next point, account intelligence, where we are going to store this information so everybody in our organization can see interactions with target accounts, right? That's essential. Joint playbooks. We have mentioned it partially, and I would cover this in the moment. So when we are mapping out our buyer journey, right, we define these programs, but it doesn't mean that marketing only draws these journeys and then sales executes, right? Marketing is an essential part in the execution. And if you have attended last week webinar with demand base, we shared a bunch of examples how to create these playbooks with some practical examples. And lastly, sync meetings. So if you don't, even if you agreed on your go-to-market strategy on the programs, but you don't regularly meet and discuss the programs, it will fail very soon. Just believe me, from our experience, it happens very soon, and then teams again go in silos mode. So make sure you have different review meetings, like weekly pipeline review meeting, like monthly revenue and sales pipeline velocity review meeting, and overviewing of the revenue metrics, and make sure that you have a quarter review of what has been done, what's holding you back, what's moving you forward, what was successfully implemented, and joint planning for the future. When it comes, these are the fundamentals. And next, executional alignment, right? As I mentioned, there are some playbooks that marketers only will run, for example, demand generation ads, right? But there are some playbooks that sales will run, like calls with prospects. But still, there are joint playbooks when, for example, let's imagine we arrange this webinar and then we want to involve a few strategic accounts that might benefit from this webinar. So we ask account executives, so SDRs, to create personalized invites to invite their target accounts. We plant relevant content to accelerate pipeline, and we do this execution together. So a lot of these activities should be planned and executed together. Go-to-market strategy without actual joint execution is just a piece of useless paper that nobody needs. I mean, I might be rude here, I might be very straightforward, but that's the reality. Having a fancy GTM deck and not having joint execution, I mean, it's just a waste of time. And that being said, I know you guys asked a lot of questions, and we'll cover all of your questions. Let me run two things by you. So first of all, let me run this poll. I would love to hear from you what part of your go-to-market strategy you can improve, you believe, based on what we have shared with you, based on these items. Just you can select a few options, so feel free to click. We want to see what do you believe, what part of your go-to-market strategy you can improve. It's interesting, right? Setting goals and objectives by analyzing revenue and sales pipeline velocity immediately dominates, and run customer research. And it's exactly what we have shared, right? A lot of companies set the goals without. Sometimes these are just wishes. These are not the goals that based on data, right? Or data-based goals. These are okay. So we want to grow 3 times, or we want to grow by 50%, but based on what? Right? And next, customer research, which means that quite often companies, unfortunately, prefer to throw spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Or how one of our clients called it. Do you remember that quote, Vlad? Doing random acts
of marketing, yes.
Trying to desperately drive in revenue. And the third one, which is pretty predictable, define typical buyer journey scenarios and core programs, channels, and content to influence it. So almost every year we see the same 3 issues, and basically that's this is exactly why we once a year with Vladimir, we host go-to-market strategy boot camp, because we know that not everybody would become our customer, but still a lot of people would love not only to learn theoretically that framework, but also implement it. So once a year, we open the doors to the live boot camp that we're just going to share with you in a second.
Before I jump in and share the bootcamp, just wanted to tell you we are going to come back and answer all your questions in a minute. And if for some reason you need to log off, please let us just know here in the comments. How did you find the webinar? You can share your impressions or just an emoji, a heads up, thumbs up or thumbs down. Any remarks there? We always appreciate hearing your feedback. So please let us know what you think of it. And like Andre mentioned, our core business is, we have some courses, but we are actually, working closely with our clients because we like to stay in the trenches. And unfortunately, we cannot help as many people as we would like. So sometimes we also do these boot camps. It's probably, I think it's like the 8th bootcamp we ran. This is the second time, I think, or the third time we are running the go-to-market strategy bootcamp. Is the right time of the year. A lot of companies are planning. So our goal here is to really help limited. We have to limit the number of companies, but still a larger number of companies with their planning. So they're actually starting a new year with clarity on what they should be doing. Instead of having to do the random acts of marketing, throwing spaghetti at the wall, or whatever other metaphor or analogy or whatever you call it, right? Your favorite is. So let me just tell you a few words about how we run these boot camps and why you might consider joining this one. So the reason that our students have joined previous boot camps, and we always interview them and ask them, like, why is the reason, why would you recommend our boot camps, is because really, even when it comes to difficult and complex topics like go-to-market strategy, we keep things practical. So we are not going to talk about theoretical frameworks or models,
Business mission.
missions and visions and stuff, but really, as you have seen, like using templates and tools and actual data from your customers, start to figure out how we can replicate those deals. So what we do is basically we have 8 sessions of 90 minutes over 4 weeks. So it takes 1 month to go through the process, where we actually work closely with you on guiding you through the framework that we have presented today, right? So we have 2 sessions, which are very actionable. Some of the stuff that maybe you have prepared, we can even review, give feedback on that, and basically taking you step by step through the whole process. And then we can also help you asynchronously in a Slack channel that we set up for this purpose, and just getting your questions answered rather quickly. And then, as I said, we make this as practical as possible because we have done this for, just like last 2 years, probably more than 50, and altogether probably more than 100 times. We kind of know what are the pitfalls and how we can make this very actionable. So that's why we share the exact same templates that we use with our clients, that we use when we are developing the go-to-market strategy and planning. Now, we were getting some questions about market segmentations. What are the criteria, etc. Well, it's all in the templates, but okay, of course, happy to answer your question in a moment. For the ICP buyer journey, exactly mapping out the buyer journey, together during the session, getting the templates that you can use to do it yourself, but also most importantly, I think also how to engage your team members from sales, from executive teams, how to set up potentially like a workshop or in another way to engage them and to get that valuable feedback, right? We do this in a small group. Usually we have to limit, so we limit to 50 people. But when you count the active people who are participating in those events, not everybody always can join. It's certainly about 20, 30 people active, so we can actually dive in and answer some questions and dive into examples. So practical information, the bootcamp is starting. Can you help me, Andre? The date was
We started on 6th November
6th.
and
Yeah.
finish it, yes, the end of the month.
Yeah, so we start. Yeah, thank you. So we'll start in a couple of weeks, 6th of November. Normally, it's like every Monday and Thursday. You can check on the link that Andre shared as well. It is afternoon for people from Europe and morning for our North American friends. And with pricing, we keep the price quite affordable. And we have a little promo as well for the first 10 members that can join for 497. Maybe just comment quickly on the difference between these two pricing plans. Basically, with the standard pricing, you get access to everything that I was speaking about, the live workshops, the Q&A, that you can access the Slack channel and all the templates, resources, recordings, right? Lifetime access to all of that stuff, right? So you are not going to lose out on this. But if you want a bit of a VIP treatment, we do have 15 spots for teams that want to join with this pricing plan up to 3 people, and also get some one-on-one time with us. And we're also going to run an in-depth mastermind where we're going to go in more details over the go-to-market strategy and the plan that people will develop and give our feedback and advice. So did I miss something? I want to start answering questions that people have. Andre, let me know if I missed something, or we should just jump into the questions.
No, I think we have covered almost everything. Again, guys, probably not everybody was listening to us from the beginning. So first of all, for the recording will be available here on the platform. If you log in, it will take some time to process the video, but if you log in, let's say a few hours later, you can rewatch the recording here. Also, we'll download it and upload it to our YouTube channel, so you will get the recording for sure. Now, unfortunately, we can't upload the deck here, so you are not able to download it. So if you need deck, just DM me on LinkedIn, send me a private message saying, hey, Andre, give me that damn deck that you were sharing because I need this, and that's it. I'm kidding, but just send me a message on LinkedIn. I will reply back with the PDF deck. We're always sharing everything, so we're not hiding this information and saying that it's just like a super secret source that is available to us. I'm kidding, obviously. So feel free to reach out. Now, let's cover all the questions that you guys have. I dropped a link to the bootcamp, so just in case if you, that would be in the pinned message. And that being said, let's cover all the questions that you guys were asking. Let's quickly navigate through the questions that people ask in Q&A, but we have already answered because I believe that would be available for everybody. So question from Lucy, how many accounts should be interviewed? I believe that at least you need to interview 5 core customers, but obviously the more customers you'll interview, the better insights, the more rich insights you'll have. So in this case, the more, the better, right? As simple as that. And then this question Vlad was covering, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Maciej asked, I think several times, we were talking about the different buyer roles, the champion, the decision maker, the influencer, and the blocker. That's what we explained. And Maciej asked, are there any other roles that we should consider? And the answer is yes. I think like practically, depending on the type of product that you're selling or solution, think about people like the power users, that can really give you a lot of useful information. Think about the, let's say, the technical buyers, which are not always the same as users, right? You might have people, let's say, from IT or other people who are participating and making a decision from the technical perspective. But also, I think what you can think about are sometimes there's companies, or sorry, there are people who are, or companies actually, who are not even working as an employee of your target account. So for example, if somebody wants to hire us or buy, let's say, a marketing technology, maybe they have, let's say, a marketing consultant who they might ask for feedback, right? And so in our case, this may turn out to be a blocker. Or in a case of that marketing technology solution, actually, a lot of times, I mean, you are just asking us here recommendations for specific tools and technology. Obviously, a lot of our clients have similar questions. So we act as an influencer in that case as well, right? Although we are external, we are not an employee of their company. So I think that's also interesting to understand. And I would also like you to think about other people who are in the company who are not really participating in the evaluation of the product or decision making, but can be extremely useful. And what I mean are like people who you might call like connectors. And these are simply people that might bring you in contact. I don't know, maybe you're a marketer, maybe you can get an intro via the marketer, although maybe the marketer is completely not involved in the purchase of the product that you're selling. Maybe they can help you and connect you to the right people. Or like, let's say, insiders. So these are, again, people who are not necessarily participating in this decision making process, but may give you some inside information into the, let's say, general priorities, challenges, etc., of their account, or maybe the buying center structure, etc., etc. These again can be people who work at the target accounts, but could be also, for example, common connection. Maybe I'm connected to somebody who used to consult for that company, and we are a good connection. Or just like a former colleague who also used to work there, or is now, maybe working with them as an external consultant agency, whatever, that could give me some insight as well. So hopefully I've addressed this question in sufficient detail. Do let me know if you have any follow-up.
Let's cover the next questions. I would cover quickly the let's say short questions. Software to get market data, basically test and marketing message. I told winter.io, so you can check it. Is one of the best tools that enable you to get this kind of data. Next, there was another question about software from Lucy. Again, what's the best tool to use when designing the buyer journey? We use Miro, but again, folks share it in the chat. There are other solutions like Figma or whatever. I mean, if you have a desire, you can even create it in the Google Sheets, right? It just structure it in a linear way. Even I totally understand that the buyer journey is not linear, but somehow you need to map it out, right? So, and next one, let's cover this one. Would you like to pick it up, Vlad?
Absolutely. So I am assuming that you are an agency and you're trying to sell or market agency services, right? So the question is how agency cost will affect the buying decision, especially like inbound lead generation and demand generation services. I think it's a really good question. And I think there is kind of different ways to look at it. Obviously, the pricing is always going to be a factor, right? But having said that, I think that there are two things to consider. The first thing is the ideal customer profile. So we have quite transparent pricing on our website, right? And we do this because we actually know that we are not for everybody, right? Maybe, let's say, a smaller company or startup might not be a good fit for us and might also be, let's say, might consider our pricing to be too high, right? where maybe, let's say, a corporate customer from the targeted geography where we work in never have an objection or a pricing. So when it comes to pricing and how it affects the buying decision, it's really important to understand that it depends on the ideal customer profile. This is one of the reasons why you want to focus on those high value target accounts. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is it also depends how you generated that opportunity, right? So if you have generated, if you're, for example, only focusing on demand capture. So what I mean by that is, for example, let's say you're just running pure outbound and relying on luck that you just get to the right person at the right time when they're looking for agency services, right? This is one way of capturing the demand. It's kind of spray and pray and high volume, but it does sometimes rarely work. And the other one could be, for example, running some paid ads, whether that's on Clutch or whether that's on Google, doesn't really matter. We are trying to capture existing demand. Now, if that's all you're doing, the problem that you have is that the buyers are going to perceive you very often as a commodity, like one of the many, right? So, oh, I'm looking for, let's say, the demand generation agency you mentioned, or lead generation. That's even better because there's so many. Like, if I'm a buyer of lead generation services, I am not a buyer, and I'm getting like daily messaging every day from people offering me lead generation services. So my perception is like low quality, high volume, very commoditized. I don't buy it. I just don't even I don't even buy it, right? But so if this is like the perception that your buyers have, you will end up in kind of race to the bottom pricing wars, where pricing is going to be the number one criterion for somebody. Because why? Because if they cannot see the difference between the different vendors, they're going to focus on things like price, right? And then, so to flip this around, if you have been doing demand generation, educating your market, and positioning yourself as a go-to, let's say, expert in a specific niche. For example, we do all these activities every day on LinkedIn and the weekly on newsletter, and we have our community and all of these different activities with exactly that purpose, because we want to brand ourselves in the mind of our buyers as the go-to and very specific type of buyer, by the way. Let's say, let's say complex B2B, enterprise sales, right? Usually larger organizations, tech, B2B tech, always, right? As a go-to expert when it comes to ABM, right? So this is why we do this. And when you are doing that, and when this is how you're generating the demand, and the perception is, okay, you are a top in your category, you're at least top of mind, then the pricing has always impact, but has a little bit less impact. And the customers are also, they expect to have to pay a premium price, right? So there you have more flexibility. I don't know if that answered your question. I hope it did. Feel free to follow up.
Let's cover other questions, and I will just quickly cover one by one the similar questions. Again, from Lucy, what's the tool you mentioned that tracks the performance metrics? So if you are referring to the revenue report and the leading, first of all, leading indicators, usually these are the actions executed by a team, so they should be submitted manually, right? Now, when it comes to tracking the performance of the program in the revenue report, again, this is manually submitted report. The data is coming from CRM. Obviously, with some tweaks, you can ask your, if you have Salesforce administrator or HubSpot, whatever, you can recreate this report in your CRM. It shouldn't be that problematic. You just need to make a few tweaks and create it. Now, if you were asking about tracking different interactions with the buyers, right, when it comes to account intelligence, there are only a few solutions that I am aware of. One we are testing right now, which is called Dream Data, and a few weeks ago, we had an episode with Dream Data's CMO where we were talking about measuring complex buyer journeys. So if you're interested, you can watch the episode. He was practically sharing how their software captures different digital traces of the journey, right? But offline interactions, this is only possible when your team captures these insights and saves them in one place, right? So everybody can have a clear overview of these processes. And the next one was how often do you track and report on this data? So for the revenue report, we believe that it should be performed every month. So you have a monthly revenue report and you track sales pipeline velocity, you track this breakdown by expansion and renewed revenue, And for the leading indicators, or for the individual programs, I highly recommend you to do it during weekly synchronization meetings. That should be a weekly checkup. Why? Because if you run a specific program, right, and this program has a bigger goal, you need or you try a new motion, or you run a complex campaign, right? You need to make sure that you execute on the plan. Because if you see that there is a decrease in your leading indicators in the actions that were supposed to be executed but were not executed, this program might fail or might underperform, right? So monthly for the revenue report and weekly for all the programs that you're running. Next one. Want to cover this one quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the best thing here is to, very quick answer is, when it comes to paid content distribution, I would focus on, let's say, obviously platforms where your buyers are. So for example, if that's LinkedIn, then for example, focusing on LinkedIn. And I would not focus on distributing content such as whatever, white papers or blog posts, etc. The best way for you to create awareness and demand is if you distribute content that is optimized for the platform where they are consuming it. And what I mean by that is simply, if you're, for example, promoting LinkedIn, content on LinkedIn, then the best way for you to actually get traction and to make sure that the people are actually consuming your content, because that's the end goal, to educate your customers, not to provoke them to click or to submit their email. Well, then you want to make sure that you're posting things that people expect to find on LinkedIn, and they came to LinkedIn to, let's say, read or watch, right? Whether that's a video, whether that's a text post, maybe with diagrams. We use a lot of diagrams. Maybe that's a carousel post with a lot of information. Those were popular lately, right? And people really enjoy reading those things. So I don't know specifically if you had any other question, but this is like a short answer. We can also recommend to dive deeper some resources, but I would like to move on.
Yeah, so let's cover this one quickly. Speaking of paid content distribution, again, which is partially what you have just covered, as we do account-based marketing and advertising in a very niche target markets. Let's say I have 3 target companies in an industry. The target audience size may be 400 or 700. In this case, is paid content effective in attracting the attention of these target accounts? And I would be honest with you, if you are no-name brand, at least, I mean, you can be a well-known brand, but no-name brand for these accounts. If you don't do any other interactions, I don't believe it will work efficiently. You need to establish, you need to do a lot of organic thought leadership. That's the first thing. And you need to do a lot of interactions so these people would be aware of your company. And there are 2 more things. First one, your content should be top-notch. So you, and when we do paid content distribution, that's why we prefer, first of all, to validate it from our personal profiles, right? If it resonates with the uncontrollable LinkedIn audience, then it definitely will resonate with your target accounts. That's the first thing, right? And you need to have a feedback about your content that people actually find it valuable. And there is a second criteria. You need to make sure that these target buyers are active on social. just the case, and I mean, everybody thinks that LinkedIn is a silver bullet, but unfortunately, in many verticals, LinkedIn would be useless for you. I mean, just in case you can find profiles of people, but they rarely log into LinkedIn. That's the reality for a lot of companies that are selling to conservative markets. So these are the things that you need to consider to answer that question. Let's capture next one, Vlad.
Absolutely. So should we always start segmentation with firmographics criteria such as industry? What should we do when we have only a few customers, each from a different industry? So in principle, the answer is yes. You should start with breaking down your target market into industries. Now, what is the level of the industry and vertical will depend a little bit on your solution. So for example, so let me explain and maybe give you an example. Like, so maybe we are breaking down our market. Let's say I have a very specific solution, some sort of, let's say, automation software for the manufacturing industry. And by studying our customers, I figure out that our software actually works best in processing industries such as, let's say, food or plastics, and I actually have the majority of our customers in food, and that there are specific reasons for that, because the variety in the ordering goes high and up from day to day and whatnot, right? So now it makes sense for me to just focus on this one specific vertical, and maybe I can go even deeper and I can focus on, let's say, fresh products like, let's say, meat. Sorry to any vegans here. Let's say if you're going after the meat producers, right? Because again of this daily variety in order taking. And so I might even go that detailed. And then let me give you another example. So if I'm a software development company, right? So I'm offering some sort of like, or offering either like a service like software development or like a technology that can be applied to any sort of industry, right? Then, and I see that the majority of our of our customers are kind of, let's say, SaaS, right? Companies. Well, it still might make sense for me to go and look at the, let's say, fintech versus, B2B enterprise SaaS, B2B SaaS, maybe whatever, even like on the level of MarTech versus HR tech, et cetera, right? But for us, for example, as fullfunnel.io, we don't need to go on that level, because the buyers, when it comes to marketing, as long as they're selling, let's say, 50K annual contract value plus, the where they go to learn about marketing, B2B marketing, how they buy and discover services is very similar across these different verticals. So for us, it doesn't make sense to, dive deeper. So we could like say enterprise SaaS or like high ACV SaaS versus maybe, let's say, B2B service companies, right? Versus, let's say, B2B manufacturing company. So there is some like thought process that has to go into that, like at what level. Now, if you are in a situation like you are, where you have maybe 1-2 customers per industry, so you're kind of in a startup mode still, I would do the same analysis, knowing that you are going to make some hypothesis, right? You're going to have limited data from that market. But again, I use this example, right? So, if the variety of products, or for example, I remember we had a client in exactly that same situation where they had a lot of different types of clients. And it was the fact they were selling some sort of a AI solution for the industry, right? And we started to figure out that, for example, the speed of a production line is an important criterion, and what the large variety, visual variety of the products, or the, let's say, the natural defects, or the rate of these natural defects, or how difficult or easy are these defects to spot, were important criteria. Now, because we knew this, we could now compare these different industries and say, well, you know what? For us, it's like, let's say, the recycling and food that are the best fit given those criteria. So we had to make some analysis to identify those specific criteria and start to compare those industries. Now, having said that, it is very different when you open up. So we're now working with an account that has like, much larger company that has thousands and thousands of customers. There, the data is kind of telling its own story, right? Because they, in the smallest vertical that we were looking at, they had at least 150 customers, right? So there you start, really it starts to be easier to compare things like, the average deal size, how long they stay, the churn rate, all of these things that Andre was sharing. So again, I hope I answered this question. Feel free to ask a follow-up.
What I suggest, we have 10 minutes left, so let's accelerate, and we have a lot of questions. So let's try to kind of we'll try to provide you short but actionable answers to your questions. Otherwise, we won't be able to cover everything in detail. So regarding marketing revenue, do you recommend a particular model or framework for attribution? So I would quickly open that slide with revenue reporting. So we highly recommend you to create this or kind of familiar revenue report where you can clearly measure revenue metrics like sales qualified opportunities, win rate, sales cycle length, ACV, and break down by new revenue, by expanded revenue, and by renewed revenue. And also, if you need, obviously, in your organization, demonstrate the impact of marketing sourced revenue. That's the first thing. The second one, Rodolfo, when it comes to attribution, we believe in blended attribution. Blended attribution is a mix of self-attribution, digital analytics, and customer research. Why? Because none of these solutions solely will provide you a clear picture. A lot of people say, hey, self-attribution is the answer to a question. But what if people answer, we have heard about you from Google or internet? What are you supposed to do with these insights, right? So self-attribution is good, but also look at the digital journey, at all the traces that you have. That's why solutions like Dream Data, Hockey Stack are good to measure it. And finally, customer research. When you do this customer interviews, you can ask sales as well to ask, how did you hear about us? What channels did you use? What attracted your attention? So that would be one of the best ways to solve it. Let's cover the next one.
Out of context, but how do you create a content strategy for service-based company? Very briefly, when it comes to creating a content strategy, the process that we follow is by starting, on the one hand, from the buyer journey, identifying all the, like I mentioned, the questions and the objections that buyers have as they move through the different stages, right? So this is like the first input that you're going to take and use. And then you start to kind of categorize these different questions and topics, and you start to categorize them into topics and subtopics. So you start to generate what we call the map of informational needs, which is, again, the topics, subtopics, and the questions that are relevant to your buyers. We then also go and enrich that map of informational needs. We look at things like, for example, the community's social, the kind of questions that people are asking online, the kind of topics that are popular, maybe in target communities, maybe the kind of questions that people are asking of their thought leaders on social in their comments, right? Looking at the major events, etc. So with this additional research, you can kind of enrich. And now this is like one of the basic steps when you're thinking about your content strategy, is to create this map of informational needs that actually tells you what your buyers care about. And then the next step is to go and audit your content and figure out what you can use to influence the buyer journey, what you might need to adapt, and what is being missed, so that you can start to prioritize your content. And then the final piece, I think, that you should also be thinking about is your demand generation calendar. So what we call demand generation calendar. So what are the activities that I'm going to do daily when it comes to content distribution and, educating my market? For example, daily social, what are we going to do weekly? What are we going to do monthly? And how should I map those key topics to this demand generation calendar? And maybe just one last final remark is, when you look at the content, also probably if you don't have a lot of, let's say, bottom of the funnel content or sales enabling content that actually helps you answer questions that buyers have as they're actually making a decision and comparing you to competitors, this is probably where I would start, and I would give this a high priority.
A lot of questions. I don't know how I can find time to cover everything, but anyhow, what type of tests and research do you suggest to do with the remaining 20% of the budget and time? Yeah, that would be simple. I know it sounds funny that it's simple because it's not, but anyhow, you need to map out the buyer journey, and then you collect all the ideas that are coming from the buyer journey exercise, how you can influence it, and you put it into prioritization scorecard. So what is the effort? What is time to value? How do you have capacity for it? What's the budget? Is it long term or short term, etc.? So a bunch of things that will help you to prioritize it. And then simply you just define what is the program that has highest score based on these different criteria that can help you to achieve your goal, right? And then you add it to your marketing plan, and all the rest stays in the backlog until the next review. That would be probably the easiest and the best way to move forward. Let's call next one.
Not fully B2B. Okay, so this is for the bootcamp. I would say that the best value is for companies, and I can share like a concrete checklist, but it is for companies that are selling to upper mid-market and enterprise, that have complex and long sales cycles, multiple buyers, ACV, annual contract value of 30K USD plus a year. So I would focus on that. I think we can move on.
Let's move on. How many MarTech tools have you analyzed, compared, and used? Will you make results of such a benchmarking at the bootcamp? Answer is no, because this is not what we do. And I think, I don't know, maybe there is a vendor that specializes in testing all possible MarTech solutions. We definitely don't do it. We believe that you should be strategic when you're selecting your MarTech tools. First of all, you develop process, and then you define what software can help you to refine or accelerate that process according to your budget, current growth stage, resources, and needs. That's the only one way. There is the worst thing that you can do is go into, I don't know, G2 Crowd and select, okay, 10 best, MarTech solutions, and then go by them thinking that they would help. So that's not how things work. So we don't do this, and don't recommend you to do as well.
Moving on to the next one. How long does it take for an average startup to get the ABM right, with or without consulting or agency? With the right strategy, with the good track record, right? So with the good data source to understand your target accounts, and some experience and some knowledge maybe in source. So I can basically share the example timelines of our clients. So we usually, after doing the initial analysis and planning, which may take, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks, 1 month. So it's not an extensive go-to-market strategy, but just understanding where we need to focus on and what kind of pilot we need to set up. We set up a pilot, and the pilots usually takes between 3 to 6 months, right? Now, understand, this is like the minimum viable program that you're going to set up during those 3 to 6 months. I mean, depending on the type of company, resources, and a lot of other things. Let's say some companies kind of have a first working version of that minimal process after 3 months, but let's say it will take at least another 3 to start really operationalizing that and making that into an actual process that is running within the company. So I would say that for that first step, count to 3 to 6 months, and then having a real operationalized process that you can now start to consider scaling, etc., will take probably up to a year to nail. And then again, I do know a lot of companies that have hired ABM agencies, have worked with them 6 to 12 months, and had nothing to show for, and had to do everything from scratch. So it really depends on the knowledge, the experience, right? That's the part why I mentioned this example. And then also obviously, like it might take, like if you're a really startup and you don't have a lot of customer data, etc., what will slow things down is not necessarily the ABM program itself, but just the kind of going towards the product market fit if you're before, figuring out who your customers are, how to sell them, etc., which doesn't have a lot to do with ABM. It has to do with the basic, let's say, business strategy, product positioning, etc.
Okay. So next one, I knew Mate would ask it one day. What's your opinion on using humor in your content and outbound marketing? Do you do it? I think it's absolutely fine if you attend in our sessions, you know, that time to time I'm making some jokes. If you have ever attended our live events, you know that I love to do some funny exercises with the audience, but that's another story. I mean, it's absolutely fine when you do it, but it should be, you know, it shouldn't dominate in your approach. So use it strategically. When it's appropriate, use it, but it shouldn't be, you know, like that's I mean, the worst thing that we can do is becoming marketing clowns, right? That's not the goal that we want to achieve. So make sure that it's used appropriately.
Yeah, I think it's all about standing out and having a unique style, right? So whether that's humor or something else, as long as you're on brand and talking about relevant things, it's also a little bit personal, I would say. I shared the link to Todd Clauser, who is, for example, doing an excellent job using humor, right? So I think it can work for sure.
Let's cover next one.
Absolutely. What is the growth hacking growth marketing system? Okay, I don't know what you mean exactly by growth hacking, but if we just look at the evolution and what this has meant in our industry, let me put it like that, it has meant about searching for shortcuts, figuring out ways in which you can go and find as many contacts and emails and send a lot of messages and do things in a scalable way, right? So this is what it has meant in the industry, right? I think the original thought behind growth hacking, where you are looking at experimentation, where you're looking at, really like looking what are the goals and what are the different ways in which we can achieve those goals, right? A lot of that in practice is not what is happening, right? So short answer is, yeah, we don't believe in growth hacking, especially when it comes to complex B2B with high ACV. There are no shortcuts, there are no silver bullets. It comes down to having a good go-to-market strategy, execution of the fundamentals right, rather, and having the full puzzle, not doing just one aspect, whatever, top of funnel or whatever. So that's kind of the opposite of what I consider to be growth hacking.
Absolutely true. I think that you nailed it down. I think that we all need to stop being indoctrinated by marketing fairy tales about Airbnb and Dropbox. That's enough. I mean, we can leave it for marketing universities, but the real world is way more cruel, especially the real B2B world. So for ABM, what warm-up methods besides target digital ads are more effective? I would say that targeted digital ads are the least effective method to do ABM warm-up. So keep in mind that warm-up is never linear. So it's just a multi-threaded engagement that you can use across different channels your buyers use for professional education for the way how they collect information about different vendors, etc. Right? So I would just name a few buckets, right? First of all, content collaboration, as simple when you invite these customers or potential customers to collaborate, to co-create content with you, contributing to your blog, to your thought leadership content, inviting to your podcast, inviting to your field events, inviting to your virtual events, etc. Right? Next is dedicated events. So what we are hosting for now, it could be called as one-to-many webinar, but in reality, you can do one-to-few and one-to-one webinars that are dedicated to these specific accounts. Right? Direct mail with fully personalized messages, personalized content hubs for these accounts, planning content, analyzing buyer journey of the content, planning that content, creating content, and then distributing through manual distribution, through organic distribution, and through paid distribution, right? And there could be multiple channels, email, LinkedIn, paid ads, etc. So this would be, if we combine everything, this would be the best ways, aside from using common connections, common network, leveraging communities or associations to which these people belong, so you can somehow nurture and attract their attentions. So I know that's like a broader answer, but I just wanted to give you a quick idea of the core interactions, and one more time emphasizing on the fact that warm-up is not linear. And the last one, we did it.
All right. Any thoughts on programmatic for driving awareness? Content is good, social is good, and demand has been flowing well for 2 years. So it depends on, if you look at your, let's say, full funnel and look at, for example, you're mentioning social content is good and the demand was flowing, so this is all good. Now, my first question would be, do you have specific programs to uncover hidden demand? So what happens with target accounts? And we see that every day that, for example, visit our website, spend maybe sometimes hours on our website with multiple people from the target account, checking out high intent pages, right? But still not reaching out to us. So I think this is the first question. And if that is the case, then I would, for example, more focus on developing an ABM program to convert that demand that hasn't been converted with other means, right? And then if you're looking if you have just kind of, okay, you're doing social, you're doing their organic and paid promotion, you're doing like a lot of different things, and now you're looking for new channels to drive awareness, which could be the context of your question, and then I would say that, I mean, it would be my first choice, but if you're kind of like scraping the bottom and looking for other channels that you could add on top, this indeed might work. Again, when it's part of the full funnel, where also you're doing potentially things like, okay, now we have identified those highly engaged target accounts that fit our ICP, and we are reaching out to them. And, you know, one of the things that we are doing there to kind of be on top of their mind, because we can't just use retargeting directly, for some reason they're not in our retargeting list, well, then we could, for example, use programmatic as a channel, as an example. So if it fits in the strategy, if other channels have been kind of like exhausted, or you milk them for what they are worth, definitely worth putting an experiment in. But again, review the whole strategy, see what are the really big missing pieces, like the example that I given, and then I would rather than focus first on that.
Okay, that was a long 1 hour, 40 minutes long webinar, but it was really cool with, I think, almost 400 people online with us. So thank you so much, guys, for great engagement, for really good questions, good and interesting questions, and for your feedback. We are still super happy to hear that the framework was helpful for you and that you were able to connect the dots and see the full picture. Hope to work with some of you on our bootcamp, or at least helping some of you that way through webinar to implement effective full funnel go-to-market strategy for 2024. We'll stay in touch and hope to see you soon in our upcoming events. Cheers. Take care, guys.
Thank you.